We'll start our walk here at Lock 7 on the CNO Canal. It's a rainy, kind of drizzly morning this morning. We'll start our walk this morning where Minnehaha Creek, that's the creek that flows through Glen Echo Park, comes out into the Potomac, and you'll see this large accumulation of rocks here. And if some of you remember, I think it was back in the early 90s, there was one evening when there was a dance going on at Glen Echo Park. People were parked in the parking lot, and there was a massive rain shower that dumped inches and inches of water in the local watershed here in an hour or so. And at the end of the dance, when they came out, they found that about a large number, 30, 40 cars, the parking lot had totally washed out. The cars were washed down the creek, and now many years later, you see the some of the large stones that probably came from the Glen Echo Park parking lot here along the river. Here we're walking onto Cabin John Island. It's technically called an island, but when the river depth is below 6 feet, you can easily walk onto it by this path here. It comes out right above Lock 7. One of the things I want to highlight here is on the branch of this pawpaw tree. If you look closely, you'll see these marks on the bark. They kind of are diagonal patterns as you go up, and what this is marks left over from Oriental bittersweet vines that more likely than not I cut off probably about 10 years ago when I started doing intensive weed watering on the island. When I first came out here, there was no path, and you literally could not walk here. The area was so thick with bittersweet and honeysuckle and other invasive plants. Here we have some late flowers from the Virginia Bluebells. This entire area here, if we were here about 2 weeks earlier, would be entirely covered with the blue blooms from the Virginia Bluebells. They're kind of past peak now, but we still have the flowers from the golden ragwort and the blue phlox. It's really quite pretty. Come across a pair of geese here that is not happy. I'm walking on this trail. I don't see any goslings right now. Yesterday at this same spot, I saw a pair that had just 2 goslings. Normally they have many more offspring. Maybe I didn't see them all. Here again, we're looking at some of the open understory. Not a lot of flowers this late in spring, but I do want to highlight one flower here. Many of you may recognize this as the invasive garlic mustard. Whenever I'm walking here and I see one of these, what I'll do is I'll grab it firmly at the base to make sure the roots come out, and pull it out and lay it someplace where it will dry out and die before it produces seeds. Um, this this whole island, going back maybe 6 years ago, was entirely covered in the springtime with these garlic mustard plants. You may have seen, like, in a square yard, anywhere from 2 to 20 of the garlic mustard plants. And over the last 6 years, a friend and myself regularly would come out here to pull the garlic mustard, and it is incredible the difference that has made in the overall ecology of the island. The All of the native wildflowers, especially the bluebells, have just taken off, uh, because the garlic mustard, it's one of those plants that produces chemicals that discourage other plants from growing. Plus, they typically grow higher than the other plants and take all of the sunlight, and outcompete them from that perspective. A curious sycamore tree here. Not sure what the story is here. We're at one of my favorite spots now, pretty close to where Captain John Creek flows in, and you're definitely seeing the golden ragwort in bloom here. That these flower heads are probably about 2.5 feet tall. This is one of my favorite spots. I call it Rue Meadow. Here's a close up of the meadow rue, and its discrete flower, and its really delicate leaves. Let's see what else we have in here. We also have down low the white violets. We have the cleavers, and we also have some plants coming up. I'm not sure what this guy is right here, but in the fall, this whole field will be filled with what I'll call confusing yellow composites. Tall flowering plants with yellow petals, many leaves, and I just haven't gotten to the point where I've been able to identify them yet. In the upper part of the island, we have much more of a established understory of the spice bush. It's just starting to leaf out now. It had its flowers already. In the fall, the female plants will produce red berries, and if you rub your hands on the leaves and smell them, there's this just wonderful spicy scent, hence the name spice bush, obviously. Very dense ground cover here of the May apples. No sign of the invasive lesser celandine up on this part of the island, which is a little more remote, and also a little higher in elevation. It drains a little bit better. One of the cool things on the island is some of these gigantic grape vines. People often see vines growing on trees, and they say, "Oh, this is unhealthy for the tree," and that's likely true for invasives. But when you have a native vine like this, it's grown with the tree. It doesn't strangle it. It absolutely does weigh it down some. But these grapes, this is probably a foot in diameter or so. They provide an incredible amount of food for birds and wild animals. And it makes me really sad when I see grapevines cut. People are thinking they're doing a good thing when in fact they're really not. A Carolina Wren, not very happy that I'm right here. There he goes. Sun's starting to come out, reflecting off of the May apples that are the main ground cover here. Here we're on beside one of several vernal pools that are on the island. And these are ecologically really important. A lot of amphibians will lay their eggs here, and since they dry up in the summertime, they don't have the fish that would, and other predators that would normally be eating the young of the amphibian. Here we're in an area where the entire ground cover is this wonderful plant called twin leaf. You can see why it's called twin leaf. They have really short-lived white flowers in the early spring. They're normally out for less than a week. It's really easy to miss them in bloom. But here's a number of seeds you can see here that should beget more twin leaf in the future. Mixed in here with the twin leaf, you have the wild ginger. These are past peak bluebells. A young spice bush right here. Have May apples. We have the fern. The diversity of the plants is really great back here. Here is a past peak, I believe, sessile trillium. They have little red flowers. Oh, back here, I'll see if I can zoom in here. We have a jack-in-the-pulpit, meadow rue right here that we've talked about already. A plant that I haven't talked about yet, with the kind of maple-ish leaf here above the ginger. It's called water leaf. I'm not sure if it's the Virginia water leaf or the other kind that I can't remember the name of right now. Here's a nice stand of the Kovals Phacelia, which is a state rare wildflower that is actually reasonably common here in the lower Potomac floodplain. Here's one of about 10 or so old foundations that are on the island. Reclaimed by nature. Typically what is left is the stone chimney. I expect these were probably inhabited until the National Park Service took over the land. When the park was formed, probably were folks who worked on the canal. I remember reading a history that said there was actually a number of speakeasies out here on the island during Prohibition. Here we have a stand of mayapple, and you can see where the deer have browsed the leaves off of a lot of them. Back when I first started coming out here to the island, there was much fewer mayaples, and the deer would totally defoliate an entire area. But now that there's many more mayaples, you'll see that there's more selective browsing, and it leaves enough of the mayapple to fruit and to build up energy for next year. Here we have a stand of blue cohosh. It's a plant that I believe has the berries are used in different medicinal purposes. And I believe it's past flowering here. You can see maybe some seeds starting to form. But kind of like the rue, it's very delicate, light leaves. And I believe this will be reasonably persistent through the summertime, the leaves. Here's a nice stand of plants that everyone probably should identify or be able to identify. Let's see if we can get a close-up here without getting very close. If you look really close here, you'll see the hairs on the stem and on the leaves. You do not want to touch this plant. This is a stinging nettle. If you do touch it, you will feel it. It's interesting. At first it hurts, but then it's kind of almost a pleasant numbing feeling, although I don't recommend anyone touch it just to experience that pleasant numbing feeling. This plant has many uses, both from an edible and medicinal perspective, but I try to stay away from it. Here by the channel that separates the island from over where the C&O Canal is. You can see the canal up here, at least the towpath. Let's talk a little bit about some of the shrubs. I'm going to start with a relatively rare shrub that's out here on the island. It is called bladdernut, and it happens to be in bloom right now. You can see here the flowers. In the fall, it will produce seeds. Let's see if we can find any. I see some here. Let's see if I can get a shot of them. There you go. The light is not real good. Let me see if I can do a little bit better here. It's the best we're going to do. They look like bladders. They're about an inch long. They're puffed up about an inch wide sometimes across, and they're very light. They float in the water. They can be blown by the wind. Let's look at probably the most common understory tree shrub here. I guess it's a tree, not a shrub. You're looking here at the fruit of a pawpaw, maroon colored flower. It's not pollinated by bees. It's pollinated by beetles. And they say one good way to pollinate to get the pollinators up into your pawpaw tree is to hang bacon, because the maroon flowers like this, they're also on the wild ginger, are said to have a kind of rotten meat smell. I can't say I've seen that myself. You'll see here a lot of the understory is these are all pawpaw trees. Pawpaw trees, and then going over here to the bladdernut. Let's take a walk along the trail here. We're seeing the golden ragwort, the yellow flowers, the phlox, the light blue flowers. There's the meadow rue. Nice stand of meadow rue here by the river. We are at Rue Meadow with the blooming rue, aptly named Meadow. coming down to the river. Water's high. I checked the gauge. It's at 5 feet 5 inches. The nominal hazard level is 5 feet. This is from the rain we've had this week. So let's talk a little bit about vines. There's at least 4 different vines growing up this tree. First, this is a good one. This is native. It's called Virginia Creeper. Produces lots of berries in the fall that the birds like. This is one you're probably all familiar with, English ivy. It's a bad one. It can weigh down and just suffocate trees. This large vine here, and I thought I saw some, oh, here. This is a good one. It's a native vine called trumpet vine or trumpet creeper. Has orange tubular flowers. In the midsummer, you can see these blooming down along the Claire Barton Parkway between Georgetown and Key Bridge. And then you see this green vine here. You see a single leaf here. I'll try to zoom in on it. Moonseed. We actually have some of these growing on the grounds at church. A good native. Looking up here, you can see the moonseed. You can see the larger leaves of the Virginia creeper. Now that the sun has come out, we can really see the reddish, really small, fragile flowers on the meadow root here out by the river. Great stand of them here.